Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at some new reveals from the set Crimson Haze, which is a small set releasing in Japan. And basically, this set is going to combine with another small set called Mask of Change to form Twilight Masquerade, which is basically our next big English set, straight after Temporal Forces. So, really cool. It is, of course, a few months away yet, so we are kind of like looking at these reveals in terms of post rotation for sure. But, it is still helpful to look ahead at new cards, and I mentioned this in a recent video that I recorded. But basically, looking ahead and seeing new stuff is kind of relevant because it could affect the prices of cards that will come out before it. So, in Temporal Forces, for example, these cards could influence the prices and, what people play post rotation. So, it is kind of important that we do look at these cards. So the first one is the big man himself, Bloodmoon Ursaluna EX. So a unique form of Ursaluna doesn't actually evolve from that Pokemon. And 260 HP is quite a lot for a 2-prize basic EX. It's even more than Raging Bolt had, which was at 240. So a very, very scary, chunky Pokemon. You could even give this the A-Spec Cape to actually get to 360, which is terrifying on a basic, but, only giving up 2 prize cards as well. But it has the ability Elder's Technique that says this Pokemon's Bloodmoon's attack cost 1 colorless less to use for each prize card your opponent has already taken. And if that ability sounds very familiar, then it should do, because it's basically the same thing as Radiant Charizard. And what's even more interesting is that this attack is basically just Radiant Charizard as well. So for 5 colorless energy, Bloodmoon does 240 damage and its Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. Now, I kind of like this card a lot, but I do have some issues with it. My main issues, and I'll get the bad out of the way before I talk about the good. The main bad issues I have with this card is that it's a wee bit uninspired. I feel like we've seen a lot of these big damage output, you can't attack next turn kind of effects recently. And, Gouging Fire does 260 for 3 energy, so it's kind of like, would I really want to play this card? I mean, there's a lot of arguments for why you would, because it's colorless, so this can fit in any deck. Gouging Fire can only be used in fire decks, technically, so there is that advantage. I honestly thought as well that this would be a fighting type Pokemon. I know this isn't strictly a downside, but I really thought they would, give fighting types some more support, but hey ho. But yeah, I personally think this card is a wee bit uninspired, and that's a bit of a shame for me personally. I know that a lot of people are going to be really looking forward to this card and experimenting with it, but sadly, I think they could have done a wee bit more with such a cool Pokemon. But, that's just my opinion. Anyway, on to the good stuff, however. It is a cool card, and it is techable in a lot of different decks, which is cool. So you could play this in Charizard decks, you could play this certainly in Lost Zone decks, that could be really scary. You could even play this in Control, which is what someone else mentioned. This wasn't my idea, unfortunately, but someone did say Control, because late game, you could just put one of these in the active spot and start swinging for 240, and then you have Penny as well to potentially pick one of these things up if it ever gets damaged. So yeah, I think this could be quite scary. Also, speaking of fighting types, you could actually use Garchomp EX to charge up the energies to use Bloodmoon earlier in the game, so that's a nice option as well. Overall, I think this card is pretty decent. 240 at any point in the game is a nice number to be threatening. I know stuff like Roaring Moon and Raging Bolt can modify their HP quite high with Ancient Booster Capsule, but Lost Vacuum isn't rotating, so you have ways of removing annoying HP tool buffs. But yeah, pretty cool card overall, a solid 3 or 4 out of 5 Embers, I would say, if I had to do a rating. But yeah, Screamtail EX is the next Pokemon we can take a look at. Sadly, a bit more underwhelming. It does have a cool attack in the form of Sudden Shriek for single colors. Says you can use this attack only if you go second and only during your first turn. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any supporter cards. So straight off the bat, that's a really annoying effect. It's way more disruptive than some people might think. However, this is 190 HP, 2-prize basic, which is a bit scary. It's very fragile. Now, what are the differences between 200 and 220? Sometimes more than you might think, because it's a lot of the time that you have to get HP modifiers involved, like damage modifiers, in order to KO these chunkier Pokemon. Like Iron Thorns down here is 230, this Bloodmoon was 260. So having stuff like 190 is just very, very fragile. I know Luminion is okay, but Luminion's still a 2-prize liability whenever you play it. So Screamtail is a bit fragile in that sense. You could play this in stuff like Espathra, though, if you really wanted to. You could also use it in God of War EX, maybe. Could be a nice idea just to buy yourself some more time because Gardevoir will be a very slow deck post-rotation anyway, so this could be a nice option. Also, Crunch, for 1 Psychic and 2 colors, does 120, and you get to discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Quite a nice move, but, only doing 120 is a bit on the weak side. So, yeah, I don't expect Screamtail to see masses of play, to be honest. Iron Thorns, however, I do think this card will see a lot of play. So 230 HP, so up there with Iron Hands in terms of being a chunky boy. Has the ability Initialize, says while this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a Roblox in play, so that includes your Pokemon as well as your opponent's, except any future Pokemon, however, don't have any abilities. So this is pretty big. This is really big. So this will shut down Radiant Greninja. It's an obvious one that comes to mind. It will also shut down Charizard. It will shut down Goldengo, so they don't have a draw engine, have to rely on B-Barrel and stuff. This will shut down like some more niche things, like the Crimson Armor ability on Armory GX. I know that's not a super played card right now, but just as an example, they won't get the damage modifier, or the damage reduction, I should say. Gardevoir EX won't be able to ramp up energy. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. There's a lot of really annoying abilities, especially in like EX Pokemon like Wigglytuff or Blastoise that might modify damage reduction stuff. This will turn it off. It doesn't turn off Iron Crown's EX, however, so you could play this with a bunch of Iron Crown's EX and then just start swinging with Bolt Cyclone. And for 1 Lightning and 2 colors, it does 140, so you could involve Double Turbo. So you could like swing for 120, but then Iron Crown would take it back up to 140. Then Capsule, you're at 160. Another Iron Crown, 180. Still decent damage. You're never going to be able to KO like other EX Pokemon realistically, but you can at least 2-hit KO stuff consistently, which is nice. And then you also get to conserve an energy by moving 1 energy from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon, which is quite nice. So you can move the Double Turbo or potentially just move a basic energy. Overall, worth mentioning, you could use Generator as well to power this card up. So, got a lot of choice. The ability is very disruptive. Attack is solid. Got a lot of HP. Yeah, I could definitely see this card seeing a lot of play. Now, unfortunately, this is where we get into the more unfortunate reveals. We do have a new Diplin line. This one has Candid Catcher, or Candid Catcher. For 1 grass and a fire, switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active and does 70 to the new active Pokemon. It's bulk. It's a tragedy, but it's bulk. You could use this in GLC, I guess, as a nice gusting snipe / effect, because there's going to be a lot of low HP Pokemon in GLC anyway. So that's nice, I guess. So Diplin could be used in GLC, but sadly, I don't think in Standard this is doing nearly enough damage. Fiona is pretty bad, sadly. Energy Press would have been okay against Gardevoir, I guess, if it was still going to be relevant, but yeah. Don't think that card's going to be seeing any play outside of stuff like GLC. Then we have Perrin and a reprint of Enhanced Hammer, which is really cool. So Perrin says reveal up to 2 Pokemon from your hand and shuffle them into your deck, then search your deck for that many Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So it's effectively like playing 2 Pokemon Communication. Now, Communication was a really good card, but it was also an item. This is a supporter card. However, there will be times where this card is really good. So like maybe you have an Entei and a Manaphy in hand or something, and you're like, oh, these cards are not what I want my Charizard and my Charmeleon. So you just shuffle those useless Pokemon back into your deck, and then you get the ones that you need. Could be a nice option, honestly. I quite like Perrin. It's not fantastic, but in a deck where you're playing a lot of Pokemon, I could definitely see this card having uses. It won't overtake stuff like Sada and Ancient decks and stuff, of course, but, could be a nice option. Also, we've got Enhanced Hammer, which is, I think, a really decent item. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing really wild in terms of special energy right now. There's no really strong equivalent of what Enhanced Hammer was disrupting in the past. There's no double colorless. There is double turbo, but double turbo is so niche anyway. I don't think it's too much of an issue. Still, just a nice card to have around, and of course with the equivalent, the Rapid Strike one, the Fan of Waves or something is rotating. So cool that we get the hammer back, I guess, for control players. We also have Community Center and Caretaker, which are this mini package, which is probably why they're revealed together. Community Center says, once during each player's turn, if a player has already played a supporter card, they can just heal 10 damage from each of their Pokemon. And then Caretaker says, draw 2 cards, but if you have a Community Center in play, shuffle Caretaker back into your deck. So you get like an infinite supporter, but you're still only drawing 2 cards a turn, and the healing 10 damage isn't great. I don't think it's that good. You know, if we ever get a really popular spread deck, but even then, just healing 10 damage feels so weak when Pokemon are consistently chopping out, well, turning out like huge damage, like 200, 240 every single turn now. Feels a bit weak to just be healing 10 damage, you know. I think in GLC it could be quite nice. Is it like an anti-spread tech? But for standard, I feel this combo is just a wee bit too weak, sadly. Then we have Lucky Helmet, which is quite a cool reprint to see. This Pokemon this card is attached to is damaged or is even knocked out. You get to draw 2 cards. That's quite nice. You could find this with Arvin. Just a nice extra budget tool card option for maybe newer players, budget decks, that kind of thing. Drawing 2 cards, it's nice. You know, it's a nice tool card, even if you only get like 1 or 2 uses out of it. So, yeah, I like the idea of Lucky Helmet being reprinted. And then the last card we have to talk about today is the one that's got like some people in hysterics. I personally don't think it's as broken as people are making out to be, and I think that's just a bit of, you know, clickbait shenanigans, but whatever. Unfair Stamp says each player shuffles their hand into their deck, then you draw 5 cards and your opponent draws 2 cards. However, you can only use it after one of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. So you can't just use this turn 1 going first or turn 1 going second. It has to be after something gets KO'd, which is a pretty big deal because it's going to limit when you can actually just pop this down. There's also going to be times where you would rather play a supporter and play rather than play this card, or, you know, maybe you don't actually want your opponent to shuffle draw 2, like maybe they have 1 card in hand or something. There's going to be some weird situations. I know that one was like really niche situation, but Unfair Stamp I don't think is as broken as some people think, especially not with Bibarel and Curlia both surviving rotation. You know, they're really good draw engines that people can play. Admittedly, the draw 2 cards is very disruptive, but at the end of the day, so many decks have draw engines and draw power. Like, this will punish stuff like Roaring Moon, but even then, they could play something like a Mew EX straight down to the bench. Where this might be good, actually, is with, like, the Iron Thorns. So, like, you shut down your opponent's rule box, so no Luminion, no Radiant Greninja, and then you just come in there with a Unfair Stamp, so they go down to 2 cards. So that could be quite nasty in that combo. Of course, you're not playing the Reboot Pod A-Spec for future Pokemon at that point, but just an option. You could also pair this up with like Arbok EX for some troll deck, I guess. But yeah, I don't think this is as broken as people think it will be. And you might need some testing before like that's cemented, but it just feels like there's so many ways to get out of small hand sizes now. It's just like, I think even Pokegear survives rotation, so it's not like we're strapped for finding supporters either. So yeah, I don't think this is as broken as people think it will be. You know, Roxanne was revealed. Everyone thought Roxanne would be broken. Roxanne isn't broken. It's like a one-of in a very few niche decks that can afford to play it. So yeah, I don't think this replaces Prime Capture as the best A-Spec. It's certainly one of the better ones for sure, you know, top 3. But I don't think this is nearly as broken as people think it is. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. Then there's some additional text down here about the Teal Mask DLC and Bloodmoon Ursaluna being a special Pokemon, which is cool, and basically just repeating what I said at the start of the video, and that April's Mask of Change will combine with Crimson Haze, and that will form our Twilight Masquerade set in May, which is very cool. So yeah, we've got a whole bunch of new cards to look at. I doubt I'll be testing much from these reveals, sadly. Bit of a shame that they revealed these cards. Would have hoped they would reveal something a little bit more impactful. Like, I guess Enhanced Hammer is pretty big at some point. Perrin's all right. Fiona's just straight bulk, I think. Diplin, is a bit trash, sadly, which is a bit of an unfortunate debut. Iron Thorns, I think, is playable. I think this card will see play in future box decks, maybe even on its own with Generator and stuff and Hammers. That could be a thing. Screamtail, definitely on the weak side, and Ursaluna, I think, is decent. You know, could definitely warrant some playable testing in Lost Zone and stuff. So yeah, you have to let me know what you think of these cards down below. Speed and Power, thank you for watching. Hopefully, you know, I'm not like too negative in these videos. I try not to be. I think it's entertaining to look at new reveals and come up with different ways to play decks. And I know that not everyone is looking at these cards from a competitive standpoint. You know, if Bloodmoon Ursaluna is your favorite Pokemon, then you'll be able to make a pretty cool deck with it, hopefully. So yeah. But yeah, Spin Out Power, and thank you for watching.